Good morning, everyone. We are starting this morning second session of our English language section of the Dubiansky Reading Conference. This conference is happening for the fourth time in the memory of Alexander Dubiansky. For us, it has become a point of connection for many Indologists, not only Russian, but foreign. Indian, Italian, some German, French, and we hope there will be possibilities of broadening the scope. We have about 70 papers in this conference this year. Most of them are happening here right now in Moscow. There are parallel sessions where there are a lot of people present. Our session in English is inevitably mostly an online session. But I'm here present in Moscow, and Maria is also present here in Moscow. So it is, let us call it a hybrid mode. So today we have 8 papers, and Nikolai kindly allowed me to be moderating this session because he is also a presenter, so that will spare his energy a little bit. And I would like to invite for the first presentation Suganya Anandakihenin, from the University of Hamburg, with the topic Rediscovering Piḻḷai Perumāļ Aiyaṅkār's aprabandham.
So, hello everybody, and I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers, especially Nikolai. This is the 4th consecutive year my participation. I'm pretty sure that Alexander is in a better place right now, enjoying all these talks, especially mine, sure of it. Okay, so let me share the presentation. Advance. Let me try to get this right. These verses are going to be the topic of today's talk. Let me also set a timer. I'll try not to go beyond whatever, but just in case. So Piḻḷai Perumāļ Aiyaṅkār has written over 700 verses in 8 compositions. That's why, you have the name Ashtaprabandham. He's, I think, known to Śrīvaiṣṇava scholars and definitely Tamil scholars as well, but probably not for, known to the average man, and definitely not known, so far as I know, to academia, especially Western academia. And I think it's time that we did something about it. I hope everybody can hear me well. Okay, good. So here's how I plan to proceed. So I'll first of all try to introduce Piḻḷai Perumāļ Aiyaṅkār. There are a few issues. Any poet who is self-respecting needs to have issues about his datings and blah, blah. So we will see a few things about that. Before we focus on his poetic corpus, because Ashtaprabandham is one of his many works, he's apparently written other ones, at least other works have been attributed to him. And then finally, we come to the core of this talk, which is exploring his versatility, meaning we will have a look in close detail, more or less, to his poetry. So let's then begin with his introducing Piḻḷai Perumāļ Aiyaṅkār. So he was a Śrīvaiṣṇava Brahmin, that much we do know. He was also known as Arahe Manavada Dasar, but it's not yet clear to me whether this was his first name or nom de plume. I'm yet to find this in his corpus. And a disclaimer right at the beginning, I haven't read all his works, all his poems. I do know some of them, but it's a very good beginning because I will be giving this talk, and that will let people, myself and others, to go and explore more this poet. It's said that he was born in Tirumangay in the Chola land. Now, all the information that he himself does not give come from later works. Some of the later works were written centuries after. So the veracity, I don't know. Anyway, I'll come to that problem later on. So he's also said to be Tinkalai if he's really an early poet, as we shall see, it would be retrospectively Tinkalai. This is a piece of information given by the Pulavar Puranam. I think it's a much later text, it's a modern text, I guess 18th or something, that tells the story of the Tamil poets in a hagiographic style. He is also claimed to be the son or the grandson or the descendant of Thiruvarangatpa Mudanar, another important Śrīvaiṣṇava poet, who composed the Ramanusanuchandadi, very important for the Śrīvaiṣṇavas. It celebrates Ramanuja. Now, Aiyaṅkār also bears the title of Divya Kavi, Divya Kavi, Divya Kavi, so divine poet. We will know very soon why. His poetry is divine, not just about the divine. I really find his poetry is exquisite and divine. He was erudite, especially in Tamil literature. And the impact of Alva poetry is absolutely visible. And I hope to point out, whenever I have the time, this particular thing. And his poem shows how devoted he was to Narayana, especially to his form as Raṅganātha, so the main deity in Sri Rangam. He was also devoted to the Arvas and the Śrīvaiṣṇava Acharyas, as we shall see. Okay, I had planned to read a Taniyan here. A Taniyan is a self-contained invocation verse. This is on Nammarva. It's a beautiful verse. I'll read it if we have the time, but towards the end, if we have the time. So the dates of Piḻḷai Perumāḻ Aiyaṅkār are really problematic. So there are people who place him in the 12th century, 13th century, 16th century, 17th century. I'm surprised nobody's placed him in the 20th, you know? Anyway, the main reasons, 12th, 13th century, is because it's believed that he was Parashara Bhatta's disciple. Parashara Bhattar was a Śrīvaiṣṇava Acharya, an erudite scholar, a poet in his own right, marvelous poet. And that's because Piḻḷai Perumāḻ Aiyaṅkār writes at least one, probably more than that, Taniyans for Bhattar, which I will show in the next slide. But then whenever you have these self-contained verses, there are scholars who say, oh, maybe he didn't write it, maybe somebody wrote it. Yes, interpolations can be there. Taniyans could have been written by somebody else, but we need to get started somewhere. So this is one such start. And he also mentions at some point that he's a servant of Bhattar in one of his other works. Why would he mention that? You know, of all the people, if he had said Ramanuja, if he had said Vedanta Deshika, or general acharyas, whom anybody could call their master. Bhattar, very specific. So personally, I think he may have been a disciple of Bhattar, but I need to know more his work, his style, etc. to be able to speak properly, especially since none of his works have been quoted in the medieval Śrīvaiṣṇava Acharya's texts. To my knowledge is very limited, so there might be some. If anyone of you knows about it, please let me know. But that's probably also because the Śrīvaiṣṇava Acharyas were very particular about what they quoted. They only quoted pramanas, meaning texts which were considered pramanas, authoritative evidence, the Vedas, Upanishads, the Arva poetry, some of the Acharya stotras, but very carefully. So I wouldn't be surprised if they knew of this work, but they didn't quote it. Okay, so there are issues figuring out. I'm actually not even sure personally who quoted him first. So these are some of the things my work is cut out if I want to work on him. But I'll get there someday. Now, the 16th, 17th century thing is, there is a story that he worked at the Piļḷai Nāyakar's court. There are some important scholars in Tamil literature, 20th century, in the 20th century, Mu Arunachalam, Naramanusam, etc., who actually think he worked at Piļḷai Nāyakar's court. And I'm not sure what makes them think so. I don't think there is anything in his own poetry that says that. Maybe one of the works like, I don't know, maybe something like Pulavar Puranam, which says it. Maybe it's a popular myth. I don't know. I need to look into it. But the editor of this work, let me find this work. It's a huge work. It's a huge commentary of the 20th century. As you can see, it's a huge work, Aprabandham. The editors clearly say, no, he must have been Bhattar's disciple. Anyway, I need to look into this a bit more. So if we go to the next slide. So this is one of the Taniyans from one of his works called Thiruvaranga Kalabambagam. I'll say more about his work later on. So here he says, the main sentence here is, the main structure is, the golden feet of Bhattar, so Parashara Bhattar, are the refuge for us. Okay, and the rest is a description of Bhattar, his father, and all that. So the golden feet of Bhattar, the son of Namperumal. Namperumal is the deity in Srirangam. Bhattar was believed to have been an adopted son of the Lord there, with honey pouring garlands, who came to delight Purattarvan. So Purattarvan was Bhatta's father, whose grow in glory hits against heaven, and who graciously said, I have placed or worn on the arms the discrescent conch of Raṅganātha, who rules over Shiva, having wiped away the curse placed on him by Aja Brahma. Okay, now here I find something extremely interesting. The Tamil says, Arangar Sangari Puyam Nanittan Indrarul Pattar. So Pattar, who says, graciously says, that the Vyakyatas, 20th century Vyakyatas, take this as worn. So Bhatta says, I have worn. As you probably know, among the Pancha Samskaras, the 5 rites of initiation into Śrīvaiṣṇavism, one of the samskara is branding of the chakra and the shankha here. So the Vyakyata says that Bhattar here apparently said, I have worn these shankha and chakra. Maybe it's a reference to something that I still don't know, but Ittan can also be placed, in which case Aiyaṅkār might be saying that Bhattar said to him, I have placed the shankha and chakra on your shoulders, in which case it could be a reference to the branding. So he could be his Pancha Samskara Acharya, the Acharya who initiated him into Vaishnavism. We don't know. Now, a few words on his poetic corpus. The Ashtaprabandham is his most well-known work. It's also known as Aiyaṅkār Prabandham. There is a saying, Ashtaprabandham Padittavan Arai Panditan. So basically, he who has studied the Ashtaprabandham is half a scholar. So if you haven't studied the Ashtaprabandham, you're not even half a scholar, forget it. Okay, it's that difficult, it's that good, but also that complex. Not difficult, but complex. But there is somebody, one of the scholars think that maybe these are not the works of one person. Many scholars wrote different compositions, and it was all attributed to one man called Arage Manamāladāsan. At this point, I'm unable to say whether this is true or not. I need to look into the themes, the kind of Tamil, the words, the usages, and all that before I can pronounce myself. But there is such a hypothesis, as good as any other. At the same time, he's also attributed other works like the Parabrahma Vivekam, but also the Tirunarayur Meghaviduthudu, and at least these two have been published as well under his name. And there are a selection of other works which I haven't been able to trace. Maybe they're not published, maybe they're not even extant. No idea if he composed them. Anyway, a few words on the Ashtaprabandham itself. So there are 8 compositions. The first one, I think it's the most fun. That's why I've given a bit more detail on it, although I won't get into any kind of detail. As you can see, half my time is gone. After 20 minutes, if I want 10 minutes of questions, likely not going to happen. Thiruvaranga Kalambaham. So Kalambaham means mixture. So this genre requires people to apply a strict set of rules. It needed some kind of subgenres to be applied for the verses, like the Ammanai, Irangal, Usal, Ur, Kali, etc. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what these are, hopefully some other time. So he had to apply all these, and it's a mixture of genres and subgenres. It's rich and it's original. This work is superb. So it has been edited separately, away apart from the Ashtaprabandham as well, and for very good reason. And then the other 2 works, Thiruvarangathumalai, Thiruvarangattandadi, Sriranganayakar, Usal Tirunamam, all 4 of them, as their names indicate, are dedicated to Raṅganātha. He was very, very attached to Raṅganātha. And Arage Manavāladāsa, his name, also has a reference to Raṅganātha, because Arage Manavalan is the name of the Perumāļ in Sri Rangam, one of the many names. And he also composed a couple on Thiruvenkatam, Tirumala, Tirupati, and then one on Aragarandadi. So the temple is near Madurai. And then finally, very interesting, but I haven't had the time to look much into this, is Nutrattu Tirupati Andadi. So on the 108 pilgrimage sites for the Śrīvaiṣṇavas, it'll be interesting, not just because the classification of the Śrīvaiṣṇava pilgrimage spots has been dated much later. So if I manage to find out the date of this poet, and if this poet definitely wrote this work, then I'll be able to figure out the dating of, at least, I confirm one way or the other about the dating of the classification of the Divya Prabandham thing, then when they started calling it 108 Divya Deshams, etc. So that's something that needs to be done. My work is cut out, and anybody who's willing to share is welcome to do so. Now, the third part, the most important part of this talk is exploring the versatility of Aiyaṅkār. So I would first like I have picked randomly 3 topics that, stand out when you read his poetry. And the first is the fascination that he expresses for Raṅganātha. He's besotted with him. And his poetry is beautiful. He enjoys Raṅganātha, the physical appearance and the temple and this and that. So hopefully I will show a few examples to you. And then later on, he tries to establish the superiority of being a devotee of Narayana. I don't know if I'll have the time, we'll see. And then finally, we'll also explore Krishna Bhakti from different angles, because he has a very original side to his poetry, but he also uses some atypical stories that are not necessarily found in the Bhagavata Purana or even in the Arva poetry. He has access to some folklores, some stories about Krishna that other people apparently did not know. Okay, so if you begin with this, he definitely was very, very fond about Raṅganātha. As we saw, out of 8, 4 works are dedicated to Raṅganātha. And there is also a saying that is attributed to him, which is Aranganai Padiya Vayal Kuranganai Padin. It means that with the mouth that sang about Raṅganātha, I shall not sing about the monkey man, Kurangan. And some people think that Kurangan is Venkatesha because monkeys live on hills. So this guy who lives on the hill is the monkey man. And then there's a story that he refused to sing about Venkatesha, and then he fell ill, and then he sang about Venkatesha, and then he was cured. And then I heard a much more interesting version of this is Kurangan. Kurangam is a word for deer, and Shiva holds a deer. So it's quite possible that he said that, with my mouth that sang about Raṅganātha, I will not sing about Shiva. There is actually a verse that I wanted to include in this, but I could not because there was simply not enough time to present that, in which he sort of establishes the superiority of Narayana. Anyway, this verse is interestingly also attributed to Thundareddy Pudiyarvad. He definitely did say that it's not there in his poetry. That's why I just put Thundareddy Pudiyarvad in case you were wondering why his name appears there. So here's a verse. I'll try. I won't read all the verses. I won't read all the translations. I'll spare you that. Time is ticking anyway, but I'll try to recite this. Bear with me because I might not get the ragam right. So, Sirputta Serum Kamala Tirtha Visin Vitrirukum Nirputta Tirumahadum Nilamahadum Madivaruda Sirai Paravai Puram Papa Selayarpon Padiketpa Narai Padalai Pudai Marbin Nairupol Madivadanga Ariadanavar Kadinda Impadayum Pudaitayanga கரியமால்வரை முளரி காடி என்று கிடந்ததாங்கு பாயிரம் நாள் மறை பரவ பார்க்கடலுள் பருமடி சூழ் ஆயிரம் வாய் பாம்பனை மேல் அரிதுயிலின் இனிதமர்ந்தோய். So he is addressing Narayana here, Narayana in the milk ocean. It is very precious. So what you see is that Narayana is there, he's sleeping, and there are tons of people around him, loving him, cherishing him, serving him. So you have as Lady Shri, I'm going to skip description of Lady Shri. Lady Shri and Lady Earth rub your feet as the winged bird Garuda protects by the side, as the Lord of the army, people Vishvaksena requests for tasks to perform, as the Kaustubhajam shines like the sun upon your chest, adorned with bunches of tulasi, as the 5 weapons which decimated the hard-to-beat asuras glitter on both your sides, as the 4 Vedas with preambles loaded you, you who sweetly rest in conscious sleep, yoga nidra is not sleeping, on the milk ocean, upon the bed that is the serpent with big gems on its 1,000 hoods, as if a big black mountain reclined, having begotten a lotus grove. So as you can see, he's cocooned in this Vaikuntha, cherished and protected by people who love him. And he is like a black mountain, but he has produced a lotus grove, a forest of lotuses. I've put it in red so that we can come back to it. You'll know why. Lotuses are his different limbs. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Now the question is, this is from the Tiruvaranga Kalamba. It's supposed to be about Raṅganātha, and here he's describing the Narayana in Vaikuntha. Where's the link? Well, the next part of the same verse shifts the focus from Vaikuntha. So the poet looks at Vaikuntha and Perumāļ there and then focuses here on Srirangam. Now there's something very interesting happening because you have a zooming in that's happening in Tamil. Unfortunately, in English, it becomes a zooming out. I'll explain in a minute. Excuse me. So Mannaham tuyar neenga Vanaham Tuludeta, Kannahal Sonatu Kaviripai Pulinath. So Kaviripai, so Sonada, he speaks of the Chola land, and then precisely where in the Chola land? Kaviripai. So where the Kaviri flows. Pulinath, so on the island. What about that island? Pambu Kadir Visumbu Iravi, Pasumpuravi Varivilangu, Sembun Madil Yer. So he speaks of the 7 ramparts. As you know, the Sri Rangam temple has 7 ramparts, 7 walls. Tiruvarangam Perumkoil. So right there you have the big temple, Sri Rangam temple. And then he focuses, he zooms in his camera. Anipun Tagadurinjum Anikadavam Nilvayan. So he focuses on the entrance with these beautiful golden doors. Manikam Veil Parappum Vairam Mani Vimanatul. So he focuses on the Vimana, the turret. And then Minnilangu Todivalayam Piyan Valam Kai Kil Kuduthu Tennilangai Disai Noki Tirunayanam Tuyil Boykil. So and then inside all this is Choranadu, the river, the island, the temple, the Vimana, and inside you have Raṅganātha. So you have this zooming in effect. Unfortunately, when you translate, I tried. At this level, at least, I didn't manage to get in the right order. I translated backwards. English is much easier when it goes backwards. So you have a zooming out effect. You start with Raṅganātha, and then from Raṅganātha, you go backwards to the entrance and the temple and the walls, and then the island, etc. I just thought this was interesting. The translation process, I mean. Oops, time is really ticking. I'll be done in 5 minutes, don't worry. So why Narayana first and then Raṅganātha? It's because for him, Narayana is Raṅganātha. Raṅganātha is Narayana. Raṅganātha is not a form of Narayana. Raṅganātha is Narayana. Instead of that cocoon, he's made the efforts to come here and stay on this world. The very usual thing that the Śrīvaiṣṇava say about Srirangam is that it's the Bhuloka Vaikuntha. So it's Vaikuntha on earth. There is this another very nice verse. Kareppurudu Uluhum Kaviri Are, Atidai Kadapador Aindale Arave, Aravam Sumapadu Moranjana Malaye, Ammale Putador Aravinda Maname, Aravinda Malarturum Adisayam Mulave. So there is the Kaviri river that flows. Again, he sets the scene. Dashing against the bank, what lies in the midst of the river is a 5-headed serpent. What the serpent bears is a mountain of coal. What bloomed on that mountain of coal is a lotus grove. There are miracles in each lotus flower. So again, he's on to this lotus grove, this forest of lotuses. And he says each lotus has a miracle. It means each limb of Narayana has a miracle added to it. I just wanted to put this photo, which I picked here, which I made yesterday near Pondicherry here. There's acres and acres of wild lotuses blooming at the same time. So I can imagine how he would have imagined the scene. And there's Raṅganātha next to him. You can imagine Raṅganātha being that black mountain with a lotus grove on him, growing out of him. The poem continues. It's much, much longer than this. But what I wanted to show you here is he says 1 lotus, and that's a reference to 1 foot. It has a link with Trivikramavatara. These 2 feet, 1 lotus and 1 lotus, that's 2 lotuses. It has a link with Vamana Trivikrama, right? 1 lotus is the navel. It gives birth to a lotus from which Brahma came out. And then another lotus is the chest, and then another 2 hands. And then if you go further, you have 1 lotus, which is the face, Pararavindena Padaravindam, Mukharavinde Viniveshayantam. You know that stotra. Very similar. And then another lotus is the mouth, and finally 2 lotuses, which is the eyes. So he begins in Srirangam, in Vaikuntha, and then in Srirangam. So he looks, there is almost a panning kind of effect. So from foot to head, which is rather usual. You have the Padadikesha Varnana, so description from the foot to the head, like Tirupanarva's Ammalanadipiran as well. Except that here, rather than just describing, he associates each limb with 1 activity. As Rama, for example, there are some very interesting things here. Like 1 lotus coughed out Bhagirathi Ganga in such a way that it filled the long locks of Shiva, etc. And then you have here 1 lotus, which is the hand. It's the last 2 lines of the translation. Bend the bow there to remove the thread with the wedding badge worn by Mandodari. This refers to killing Ravana, which removed the symbol of marriage of Mandodari, his wife. So he speaks of Raṅganātha as if he was also Vamana Trivikrama. He was also Vishnu, from whose navel came Brahma. also Rama. So Raṅganātha is all of these people. He is also Vishnu who creates. He creates Brahma. Okay. He also protects. He protects Shiva, who is in trouble. Right. So at the same time, he also manages to establish the superiority of Narayana over Shiva. I mean, just in case you didn't know, I'm not sharing my opinions. I'm just pointing out what the poet is saying. And he does a few things like that. Okay, I'm just trying to go to the next slide. Something has happened. Oh, I hope it works. Yes. So the supremacy, at the end, he says, those two big lotuses, those two eyes are looking at me. So he looks at Narayana, and finally he sees Narayana looking at him, right? So the whole circle is complete. And then what does he ask from him? He asks for an end of the ocean of samsara, which means that he is asking for liberation. And there's only the supreme God that can give liberation, not any other deity. So he establishes many things here, as you probably saw. Narayana is Raṅganātha, Raṅganātha is Rama, Krishna, Trivikrama, etc. He is the supreme being. He is the creator, the cause of the world. He's the protector. He also dissolves. You can see here that he speaks about the cosmic egg during the Piḻḷai. He swallows it and then, he spits it out. So he's the supreme being. So this is something that is always at the back of his mind, the supremacy of Narayana. But at the same time, he enjoys the beauty of Raṅganātha, which he can see with his own eyes. And he knows his Arva poetry, which he tries to replicate to a large extent, but also innovating in the same process. This will be a kind of conclusion, because my second part, no time for my second part, no time for my third part. These are verses that are reminiscent of Tondaradipudi Arva, a few of them. He speaks that caste, etc., doesn't matter so long as you're devoted to Narayana. Even if you're of a great caste, you're rich, you're learned. If you're not a devotee of Raṅganātha, it doesn't matter. You're useless. Basically, that's it. And then there are some Krishna Bhakti verses that are extremely, extremely novel. This, for example, linked to the Tadipandan story. If you don't know, don't worry. I've written a whole article about it. It's available for free on my academia account. You can read it. So I would just like then to conclude now and say thank you so much. I wanted to say a lot more than this. I could not, but I hope that, I have introduced a bit the poet to you, although I'm very sure that I haven't done justice to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now better?
Yes, definitely.
Yep. Okay, good. We'll stay with that. I invite questions. Any comments, probably from the audience? We do have. Maria here would like to ask. I will just turn the camera to her, and I hope she can. 1 second to make it, a little better.
Am I audible?
Yes, I think you can take it.
Okay. Suganya, thank you very much for your beautiful presentation. I've enjoyed it very much. And my question is, why, to your opinion, this poet, Piḻḷai Perumāļ, actually, I have heard about him for the first time from you right now. What do you think? Why was he not canonized among the 12 Alvars? Because his poetry is very beautiful. It is no worse than the poetry of Alvars, official Alvars, I would say. So what is the reason? Why do you think it was like that?
Okay. First things first. The Arvas are sealed. Okay. The Arvas are a class apart. Nobody can become an Arva. They were 12 in number, 10 or 12 depends. They are there. They cannot be, you can't tamper with that list, right? His poetry, definitely, it could have been canonized by the later Śrīvaiṣṇavas for the later Śrīvaiṣṇava poetry. For example, Thiruvarangathamudanar, his poetry was integrated to the Nalayira Divya Prabandham, right? It's a praise poem dedicated to Ramanuja. They could have done that. Well, they didn't do it. I just wouldn't know why it wasn't done. I don't even know why it's not as popular as it ought to be. Although his work, his verses are definitely quoted by the modern day Śrīvaiṣṇava teachers. They definitely do that. But canonizing, I think, is a very specific thing. Only certain people with like the Arvas were canonized, and then certain Acharyas were canonized. Whoever is outside that lineage of, Acharya, Shishya, Parampara is usually not canonized. There are exceptions. So it's a very, very specific thing. But definitely it's a mystery for me why he is not better known than he is. Like you are saying, you've never heard of it. He's written close to 800, probably even 1,000 verses, delightful verses. And why don't we know more about him? Why is there not more literature, no secondary literature about him among the scholars? I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have more questions? Maybe one?
Yeah. Just may I ask one more question? Suganya, thanks a lot for educating us about less known Vaishnava poets. And I also have to make a confession about my ignorance, because I have never heard of him. And now I checked that there is no mention of him in Zvelebil's history of Tamil literature. So my question is whether are there any English translations apart from yours or nothing? Yeah. So it's just you are like discovering him. Actually, not really rediscovering, but rather discovering them for the audience also.
I think yes, exactly that. That's exactly it. Because we are not discovering. He's been there all along. Some people knew him all along, but rediscovering on behalf of the audience. Yes. So unless some of us produce a translation, there is no translation. There are a couple of editions, as I pointed out to you, and some of the works have been published separately, like the Thiruvarangatu, Kalambaham, etc. Small prefaces. People have done whatever they could, but translation, definitely not. There aren't. So far as I know, no. Many bloggers do take up. Many bloggers have quoted his verses saying, oh, he's wonderful. I'm not sure they have done any translations either. Perhaps they've lost in a free way, but there is no proper translation.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.